Don't talk. Homeless man saved female police. After he caught something shocking on the street. The words came like a death sentence whispered through the rain. Don't talk, just listen. Officer Lena Turner's blood turned to ice as the gravelly voice cut through the storm. She had stepped out of her patrol car expecting another routine night in downtown Seattle, but the homeless man pressed against the graffitied wall wasn't asking for change or food. His eyes burned with terror that made her hand instinctively move toward her weapon. Harrington looked like every other forgotten soul the city had discarded. His clothes hung in tatters, his beard was matted with rain and grime, and his weathered face told stories of countless nights sleeping under bridges. But something in his voice made Lena freeze. This wasn't desperation or madness speaking. This was pure, raw fear. "Behind you!" he hissed again, his voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "Don't turn around fast." He's watching. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to spin around, to draw her weapon, to call for backup. But something about Harrington's steady gaze held her in place. At his feet, a scraggly German shepherd mix with one ear missing growled low, its hackles raised toward the darkness behind her. The storm had turned the narrow alley into a canyon of shadows and echoing water. Steam rose from the hot asphalt where rain met the day's lingering heat. Dumpsters lined the walls like metal sentinels, creating perfect hiding spots for anyone with ill intent. Lena felt exposed, vulnerable, caught between trusting a stranger society had written off and ignoring what might be a legitimate threat. "Who's back there?" she whispered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Harrington's cracked lips barely moved. "Man with a gun. Been following you for 3 blocks. Watched him duck behind the dumpster when you parked." His dog whined softly, pressing closer to his leg. "Duke here saw him first. Dogs got better instincts than most people." The pieces clicked together in Lena's mind like a puzzle she didn't want to solve. She had felt watched lately, that prickly sensation between her shoulder blades that every cop learned to trust. There had been threats at the precinct, angry family members of people she'd arrested, the usual hazards of wearing a badge in a city where tension simmered just below the surface. "How long has he been there?" she asked, slowly reaching for her radio while keeping her eyes on Harrington. 5 minutes, maybe more." Harrington shifted slightly, and she saw him wince. "I've been watching him watch you." Something ain't right about this whole thing. Thunder crashed overhead, and in that moment of sound and fury, Lena heard it. The soft scrape of a shoe against wet concrete. Duke's growl deepened, and the hair on the back of Lena's neck stood up. Someone was definitely back there. She keyed her radio with practiced calm. "Unit 47 requesting backup. Possible 1062 at the intersection of Pine and 3rd. No lights, no sirens." The response crackled back through the rain. "Copy, Unit 47. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes. In police work, that might as well be 8 hours." Lena calculated her options while keeping her expression neutral. She could retreat to her car, but that would mean turning her back on an unknown threat. She could advance and confront whoever was hiding, but that might be exactly what they wanted. Or she could trust the word of a homeless man and his one-eared dog. "What do you suggest?" she asked Harrington quietly. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "Been thinking about that. Duke and me, we know these alleys better than anyone. There's a back way out through the fire escape behind you, but you'd have to trust me to watch your 6. Lena studied his face. Beneath the grime and exhaustion, she saw intelligence, determination, and something else she hadn't expected. Genuine concern for her safety. This man had nothing to gain by helping her and everything to lose by getting involved with police business. Yet here he was, offering assistance when he could have simply melted back into the shadows. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Harrington's eyes flickered with something that might have been pain. "Because you looked at me like I was human when you got out of that car. Most cops, they see the clothes, the smell, the dog, and they see a problem to be moved along. You saw a person." The words hit Lena harder than she expected. She realized he was right. When she'd first spotted him, her initial thought hadn't been to roust him or demand he move on. She'd simply acknowledged his presence with a nod, the way she might greet any citizen on the street. Another sound from behind her, closer this time. Duke's ears pricked forward, and he let out a soft warning bark. Harrington immediately quieted him with a gentle touch. "We need to move," he whispered urgently. "Now." Lena made her decision. "Lead the way." Harrington pushed off from the wall, Duke falling into step beside him with silent precision. They moved through the alley like ghosts, Harrington's knowledge of every shadow and obstacle evident in his fluid movement, despite his apparent frailty. Lena followed, her hand resting on her service weapon, every sense heightened. They had made it perhaps 20 yards when the night exploded. "Seattle PD, stop where you are!" The voice came from behind them, male, aggressive, and definitely not one of her fellow officers. Lena spun around to see a figure emerging from behind the dumpsters, something dark and metallic glinting in his hand. "Gun!" she shouted, drawing her weapon in one smooth motion. Harrington dove left, pulling Duke with him behind a pile of construction debris. Lena rolled right, using a parked delivery truck for cover as the first shot rang out. The bullet sparked off the brick wall inches from where her head had been. Training took over. Lena keyed her radio while returning fire. "Shots fired! Officer under attack at Pine and 3rd. Suspect armed and dangerous." The response came immediately. "All units, officer needs assistance." ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Still an eternity. The gunman advanced, using the storm and darkness as cover. Lena caught glimpses of him moving between the dumpsters. Tall, wearing dark clothing, moving with the confidence of someone who had planned this encounter. This wasn't random street crime. This was targeted. "You should have minded your own business, Turner," the voice called out through the rain. "Some people don't like being locked up." Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Tommy Brennan. She had arrested him 6 months ago for armed robbery, and his conviction had been overturned on a technicality just last week. He had sworn vengeance in court, but she hadn't taken it seriously. In her 5 years on the force, she'd heard countless threats. Most never materialized. This one had. Another shot shattered the truck's side mirror, spraying glass. Lena ducked lower, calculating angles and distances. Brennan had position and firepower, but she had training and backup coming. The question was whether she could stay alive long enough for it to arrive. That's when Harrington made his move. While Brennan focused on Lena's position behind the truck, the homeless man emerged from the shadows like a specter. Duke was right beside him, both moving with predatory silence. Lena watched in amazement as they flanked Brennan's position, using debris and abandoned construction materials for cover. Harrington caught her eye and held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. Duke launched himself at Brennan's legs with a snarl that seemed to come from the depths of hell. The gunman went down hard, his weapon clattering across the wet pavement. Harrington was on him instantly, using his body weight to pin the larger man down. "Help!" Harrington grunted as Brennan fought beneath him. "Can't hold him long!" Lena sprinted across the alley, her cuffs already in hand. Together, she and Harrington wrestled Brennan's arms behind his back, while Duke maintained his grip on the man's ankle, growling like a furry demon. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound Lena had heard all night. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Backup was finally arriving, but the danger was over. Brennan lay face down in the rain, cursing and struggling against the restraints, but effectively neutralized. Lena stood slowly, adrenaline still coursing through her system. She looked at Harrington, who was sitting on the ground beside Duke, both of them breathing hard. The dog's tail wagged weakly, and his human companion scratched behind his remaining ear. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Harrington shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. "Duke did most of the work. I just pointed him in the right direction." "No," Lena insisted, crouching down to his level. "You both saved my life. You saw the threat, you warned me, and you put yourself in danger to help someone you barely know. Red and blue lights began strobing through the alley as the first patrol cars arrived. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, securing the scene with professional efficiency. Lena's sergeant, a 20-year veteran named Rodriguez, took charge immediately. "Turner, you okay?" "Fine, Sarge. Thanks to them." She gestured to Harrington and Duke. Rodriguez looked skeptical as he took in Harrington's appearance, but Lena quickly explained what had happened, how the homeless man had spotted the threat, warned her, and ultimately helped bring down the gunman. As she spoke, she watched her colleague's expression change from doubt to surprise to grudging respect. "Well, I'll be damned," Rodriguez muttered. "Harrington, is it? Looks like the department owes you a debt of gratitude." Harrington stood slowly. Duke pressed against his side. "Just did what anyone would do." "No," Lena said firmly. "Most people would have walked away. You stayed. You helped. You risked your life for mine." The scene became a whirlwind of activity. EMTs checked everyone for injuries. Detectives arrived to process the crime scene. The district attorney's office was notified about Brennan's arrest. Through it all, Harrington and Duke stood slightly apart, uncomfortable with the attention, but not allowed to leave until their statements were taken. Lena found herself watching them, seeing things she had missed before. The way Harrington's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert for threats or opportunities. The gentle way he spoke to Duke, the obvious bond between man and animal, the quiet dignity he maintained despite the stares and whispered comments from some of her fellow officers. When the paperwork was finally complete and Brennan was loaded into a transport van, Lena approached Harrington one more time. "Where will you go tonight?" she asked. He shrugged. "Same place as always. Duke and me, we've got our spots." The thought of him returning to the streets after what he had done for her felt wrong on every level. Lena made a decision that surprised even her. "I've got a couch," she said, "and Duke looks like he could use a warm meal." Harrington's eyes widened. That's kind of you, but I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition. It's the least I can do." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Besides, I'd feel better knowing you were safe tonight. Brennan might have friends." It was a valid concern, and one that seemed to resonate with Harrington. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Just for tonight," he said quietly. Lena's apartment was small but comfortable, a converted loft in a renovated warehouse building. Harrington seemed overwhelmed by the space, turning in slow circles as he took in the furniture, the books, the normal trappings of a settled life. Duke was less reserved. The dog immediately began exploring, sniffing everything with the curiosity of an animal who rarely encountered new environments. Lena found a bowl and filled it with water, then rummaged through her refrigerator for something suitable for a dog. "When did you last eat?" she asked Harrington. "This morning. Had some soup at the mission." She pulled out sandwich fixings and began assembling food for both her guests. As she worked, she found herself stealing glances at Harrington. Cleaned up a bit, his hair combed back and his jacket hung up to dry, he looked different, younger somehow, despite the lines that hardship had carved around his eyes. "How long have you been on the streets?" she asked gently. Harrington was quiet for a long moment, his hands working absently through Duke's fur. 3 years this October. Lost my job at the shipyard when they downsized. Couldn't make rent, got evicted. One thing led to another." He made it sound simple, but Lena knew it rarely was. The distance between housed and homeless was often smaller than people wanted to believe. A job loss, a medical emergency, a family crisis, any number of factors could send someone spiraling into the world Harrington now inhabited. "What about before that?" "Machinist. 22 years at the same company. Had a little house in Ballard, not much, but it was mine." His voice carried no self-pity, just a matter-of-fact recounting of how his life had changed. "Duke here. He was my neighbor's dog. When she passed away, her family was going to take him to the shelter. Couldn't let that happen." Lena set plates on her small table, including a bowl of leftover stew for Duke. The dog wagged his tail appreciatively, waiting for permission before approaching the food. He's well trained, she observed. Smart as they come. Knows things about people I'm still learning. Harrington smiled slightly. Like tonight. He spotted that Brennan fellow before I did. Kept looking back at you, whining. I finally paid attention to what he was trying to tell me. They ate in comfortable silence, the rain still drumming against the windows. Lena found herself studying her guest more closely. Despite his circumstances, he had good table manners, kept Duke from begging, and cleaned his plate without seeming desperate for the food. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. Harrington nodded. "When you first saw me tonight, before all this happened, what were you thinking?" He considered the question seriously. "Honest? I was thinking you looked tired, stressed, like you were carrying weight that wasn't all yours to carry." He met her eyes. "Lot of cops, they see the job as us versus them. Good guys, bad guys. But you looked like someone who still saw people as people." His observation was uncomfortably accurate. Lena had been struggling lately with the cynicism that seemed to infect so many of her colleagues. 5 years of seeing humanity at its worst could wear down anyone's faith in basic goodness. "Is that why you helped me?" "Partly." Harrington set down his fork and leaned back. "But mostly because Duke liked you. Dog's a better judge of character than I am." Duke, hearing his name, looked up from his empty bowl with what could only be described as a canine grin. Lena set up the couch with blankets and pillows, finding an old sleeping bag in her closet that would serve as a bed for Duke. Harrington accepted the arrangements with quiet gratitude, clearly uncomfortable with the kindness but too exhausted to refuse. "Tomorrow I'll help you find resources," she said, as she prepared to head to her bedroom. "Shelters, job programs, whatever you need." Harrington's expression grew guarded. "That's kind, but most of those programs, they don't work for people like me. Too many rules, too much bureaucracy, and they won't take Duke." "Then we'll find ones that will," Lena said firmly. "What you did tonight, that was heroic. Heroes deserve better than sleeping in alleys." She left him with that thought, closing her bedroom door with the strange sensation of having crossed some invisible line. In her 5 years as a cop, she had never brought home anyone she'd met on the job, but then again, she'd never met anyone quite like Harrington. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of gunfire and rain. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through her windows, and she could hear movement in the kitchen. For a moment, panic flared. Had she made a terrible mistake trusting a stranger? But then she heard Duke's tail thumping against the floor and relaxed. She found Harrington at her sink, washing the dishes from the night before. Duke sat nearby, alert and content. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Least I could do." He dried his hands on the dish towel. "Coffee's made if you want some." The coffee was perfect, strong but not bitter. Lena poured herself a cup and studied Harrington in the morning light. Clean and rested, he looked like a completely different person. The haunted look was still there, the wariness that came from too many nights watching for danger. But there was something else now. Hope, maybe, though she sensed he was trying not to let himself feel it. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about what you said last night, about most programs not working for people like you." Harrington tensed slightly. "Lena, last night it was amazing, having a real roof over my head, eating at a table like a human being. But I know this isn't permanent. I don't want you to think I expect—" "What if it could be?" she interrupted. He stared at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if this didn't have to be just one night? What if there was a way to make it more permanent?" Harrington stood slowly, Duke rising with him. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but charity isn't—" "This isn't charity," Lena said firmly. "This is business. I've got a problem, and you might be the solution." He waited, skeptical but listening. "The precinct has been talking about community outreach programs, ways to bridge the gap between police and the people we serve, especially the homeless population. Most of our officers don't understand that world. don't know how to communicate effectively. She took a deep breath. But you do. You know the streets, the people, the real problems they face. You want me to be some kind of informant? There was distaste in his voice. No. I want you to be a liaison, a translator, someone who can help us do our jobs better while helping people like yourself get the resources they need. She leaned forward. It would be part-time at first, probably just consulting work, but it would be legitimate employment with legitimate pay. Harrington was quiet for a long moment, his hand absently stroking Duke's head. And Duke? Duke comes with you. Far as I can tell, you're a package deal. The silence stretched between them, filled with possibility and uncertainty. Lena could see the war playing out in Harrington's expression, hope battling against years of disappointment, the desire for dignity wrestling with the fear of rejection. Finally, he spoke. What would I have to do? Help us understand. When we encounter homeless individuals, you could provide context, suggest approaches that might be more effective than our usual methods. Attend some community meetings, maybe ride along occasionally to serve as a bridge between our world and theirs. And in return, steady income, benefits eventually, and, she gestured around the apartment, help finding permanent housing, not charity, earned through honest work. Harrington looked down at Duke, who was watching him with those impossibly intelligent brown eyes. The dog's tail gave a single optimistic wag. I'll need to think about it, he said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But even as she said it, Lena could see the decision forming in his eyes. Hope was winning. Want to see how this incredible story unfolds? Watch our full video to discover how a single act of courage transformed 2 lives forever, and learn why sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who need saving most. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss our next incredible true story. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Lena had to sell the idea to her sergeant, then to the captain, then to the Civilian Oversight Committee. The concept of hiring a homeless man as a police consultant raised eyebrows and generated skepticism, but Lena was persistent. She arranged for Rodriguez to meet Harrington, not in the sterile environment of the precinct, but at a coffee shop near Pioneer Square where many of Seattle's homeless gathered. She wanted her sergeant to see Harrington in his element, to understand the respect he commanded among his peers. The meeting exceeded her expectations. Harrington spoke with quiet authority about the realities of street life, the complex social hierarchies among the homeless, and the often counterproductive nature of traditional police responses to quality-of-life issues. Rodriguez, a street cop to his core, recognized authentic expertise when he heard it. You know your stuff, the sergeant admitted grudgingly. But can you work with cops? Some of my officers, they might not be as open-minded as Turner here. Harrington's smile was slight but genuine. Sergeant, I've been judged by experts. If I worried about what people thought of me, I'd have given up a long time ago. The pilot program was approved on a trial basis. Harrington would work 15 hours a week initially, primarily in advisory capacity. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough to cover basic expenses and start building toward independence. Finding housing proved more challenging. Many landlords were reluctant to rent to someone with no recent rental history and a large dog. But Lena was relentless, and eventually they found a small studio apartment above a bookstore in Capitol Hill. The elderly owner was a former social worker who understood second chances. The day Harrington got his keys was emotional for both of them. Standing in the empty studio with Duke exploring every corner, Harrington seemed almost afraid to believe it was real. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years since I had a key to anywhere. Lena helped him move his few possessions from various hiding places around the city. It was heartbreaking to see how little he had accumulated during his time on the streets. A few changes of clothes, some books wrapped in plastic, photographs in a waterproof pouch, and Duke's worn leash and collar. But it was also inspiring to see how carefully he had preserved what mattered most. The photographs were of his parents, long deceased, and a woman Lena assumed was a former girlfriend or wife. He never mentioned her, and Lena didn't ask. Everyone was entitled to their private sorrows. The books were eclectic: philosophy, history, mechanical engineering texts, and several dog training manuals. It painted a picture of a mind that refused to surrender to circumstances, that continued learning and growing even in the most difficult conditions. His first day of official work was rocky. Some officers were openly hostile, making comments about taxpayer money going to bums. Others were merely suspicious, uncertain about having an outsider in their midst. But Harrington handled it with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything else. The breakthrough came during his second week. A homeless encampment under the Ballard Bridge had been the site of several complaints, and the usual approach, roust everyone and tell them to move along, had failed repeatedly. The campers would scatter, then return within days. Harrington accompanied the responding officers and immediately identified the real problem. The camp was organized around an elderly Vietnam veteran named Jimmy, who was protecting several younger individuals with mental health issues. Simply dispersing them would leave the vulnerable members without protection. Instead of forcing an eviction, Harrington suggested connecting Jimmy with VA services he hadn't known he was eligible for, and linking the younger campers with appropriate mental health resources. It took longer than a simple sweep, but the results were lasting. The encampment dispersed voluntarily as its members found better alternatives. Word of the success spread quickly through the department. Requests for Harrington's consultation began coming from other precincts, other shifts. His hours increased, and with them, his confidence. Lena watched the transformation with pride and something deeper she was still reluctant to name. The man who had saved her life in that rain-soaked alley was revealing himself to be so much more than a victim of circumstance. He was intelligent, compassionate, and possessed of a hard-won wisdom that could benefit far more people than just herself. Their friendship deepened as well. What had begun as gratitude and professional collaboration evolved into genuine affection and mutual respect. They began spending time together outside of work, sharing meals, walking Duke through the city's neighborhoods, attending movies or concerts. Lena found herself looking forward to these moments with an intensity that sometimes surprised her. Harrington's perspective on life, shaped by hardship but not embittered by it, challenged her own assumptions about success, happiness, and what truly mattered. One evening, as they sat on her apartment's small balcony watching the sunset paint Elliott Bay in shades of gold and crimson, Harrington voiced something he'd clearly been thinking about. "Do you ever wonder if that night in the alley was fate?" he asked quietly. Lena considered the question. "You mean, were we meant to meet?" "Something like that. I mean, what are the odds? You park on that exact block. I happen to be in that exact spot. Duke happens to notice the guy with the gun." He shook his head. "Seems like a lot of coincidences." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it wasn't coincidence at all. Maybe it was just two people being exactly where they needed to be, when they needed to be there. And now?" She looked at him. This man who had literally saved her life, and in doing so had transformed his own. "Now I think we're still exactly where we need to be." The words hung in the evening air, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to voice. But the feeling was there, growing stronger with each shared experience, each moment of understanding, each glimpse of the future they might build together. Duke, sleeping at their feet, stirred and looked up at them both with what could only be described as canine approval. Even he seemed to understand that what had begun with danger and desperation in a rain-soaked alley had evolved into something much more precious. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Lena reached over and took Harrington's hand. He didn't pull away, and she felt the warmth of possibility flow between them like an electric current. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that second chances were real and that heroism could emerge from the most unexpected places. But tonight, on a balcony overlooking the city that had tried to forget them both, A police officer and a formerly homeless man sat together in comfortable silence, their loyal dog at their feet, and dared to believe in happy endings. The transformation hadn't been easy, and it wasn't complete. Harrington still struggled with nightmares, still flinched sometimes when groups of officers approached too quickly. The streets had left their mark on him, and those scars might never fully heal. But he was building something new from the foundation of that terrible, wonderful night when fate and courage had intersected in a rain-soaked alley, and he wasn't building it alone. 3 people, 2 human, 1 canine, had found each other in the darkness and discovered that sometimes the most profound connections emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Their story was still being written, but the early chapters suggested it would be worth reading to the very end.